Here's the moment I keep coming back to. I'm sitting at a Thanksgiving dinner table, surrounded by my husband's family, surrounded by the smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon candles, and 30 years of someone else's memories baked into the walls. And my husband's cousin is pointing a fork at me, laughing, suggesting that my entire military career is essentially a modeling contract with the Department of Defense. And my husband is staring at his plate. Not because he didn't hear it, not because he was distracted. Because he made a choice. That moment, that specific, quiet, devastating choice, changed something between us. Maybe it changed something in me. And the months that followed showed me things about loyalty, about courage, about what it costs when the people closest to you decide your dignity is negotiable. Let me take you back to the beginning. It was the last Thursday of November. My husband Daniel and I pulled into the driveway of his parents' home in Chesapeake, Virginia, just as the sun started dropping behind the tree line. The Hargrove family house. Brick split level, same one they'd owned for nearly 3 decades. The driveway was already packed with pickup trucks and SUVs. The neighborhood smelled like every other coastal Virginia autumn, salt air, chimney smoke, someone's lawn still damp from morning frost. I stepped out of the passenger seat and took a second before straightening up. My right knee had been giving me trouble all week. Old injury. Some days I barely notice it. Other days it reminds me that 39 isn't 25, no matter how many miles I run. Daniel walked around the car. You okay? I shut the door. Yeah. He looked at me. Sure. I said yeah again. And looking back, I should have paid attention to what that question was really telling me. When someone asking you, a simple question makes you feel something small and irritable, something's already off inside you. Something's already bracing. Inside, football was on television. Kids were sprinting through the hallway with paper plates. Someone had burned the dinner rolls, and the whole kitchen smelled vaguely of smoke. My mother-in-law was doing that thing where she insists everything is fine, while clearly holding the entire evening together through sheer willpower and quiet panic. Normal family holiday stuff. I spent the first hour helping in the kitchen, circling the edges of conversations, doing the thing I'd gotten good at over the years, answering questions about my career without actually answering them. Most people hear the word Navy and their eyes light up. They want the action stories. They want the dramatic stuff. What ships, what countries, anything explode. After enough years, you learn how to smile and redirect. Some things aren't classified. They're just private. They belong to you. Around 6 o'clock, everyone moved to the table. That's when I found myself sitting across from Connor Weston. Now let me tell you about Connor. Connor was 32, a Navy lieutenant, genuinely talented, and one of the most exhausting human beings I have ever shared oxygen with. Every conversation within a 10-foot radius of Connor eventually became about Connor. His opinions, his accomplishments, his trajectory, his plans. He had the kind of confidence that hadn't yet been tested by actual consequences, and it showed. When I sat down, he was already mid-sentence about a leadership presentation he'd been invited to give at Naval Station Norfolk. His mother was beaming. His father, Robert Weston, retired Command Master Chief, 70-ish, quiet, the kind of man whose stillness makes everyone else feel loud, sat beside her and said nothing. I noticed Robert right away. I always noticed the quiet ones. Connor kept talking. Somewhere around the main course, someone asked me how work was going. Busy, I said. Connor looked up, still flying. Sometimes. Sometimes, he leaned back. That's the most officer answer I've ever heard. A few people laughed. I smiled. No big deal, keep moving. But Connor didn't keep moving. You know what I find kind of funny? He gestured with his fork, not waiting for anyone to ask. The public has this whole image of military life, especially Navy officers. He looked directly at me. You're still in, right? Last time I checked. More laughter. Connor grinned. He was enjoying himself. That was the problem. Let me guess. He pointed the fork in my direction. These days, your main job is posing for recruitment posters. Several people laughed. Not everyone, but enough. The uncomfortable kind of laughter, the kind people produce when they don't want to challenge someone but also don't want to be caught not laughing. I looked at him. I wasn't angry, not yet. Mostly I felt something duller and more familiar than anger, disappointment, because I'd heard variations of that line before. Different rooms, different faces, same message underneath. Women advance because they photograph well. Women get noticed because someone needed the optics, not because of what they built, not because of what they survived. Before I could respond, Connor's aunt jumped in cheerfully. Oh, come on, Dana does photograph well. More laughter, warmer this time, which somehow made it worse. I glanced at Daniel. He was looking at his plate. I want you to understand what that look meant to me. I wasn't expecting a confrontation. I wasn't expecting Daniel to stand up and deliver some dramatic speech in my defense. One sentence would have been enough. One quiet, simple sentence. Something that said, hey, that's not cool. Something that said, she's sitting right here. Instead, the plate. Connor read my silence as surrender. He always read silence that way. Hey, I'm joking. He raised his hands, palms up, then added almost immediately, mostly. That second word landed differently. A few people shifted. The laughter that followed was smaller, more uncertain. The room was starting to feel it, that particular discomfort that settles in when something has gone slightly too far and nobody knows quite how to address it. That's when I heard the sound. A single fork, placed carefully against a plate. Robert Weston had set his fork down. Slowly, deliberately. The table went quiet, not the comfortable kind of quiet, the kind where people suddenly remember they're holding utensils. Robert didn't look at Connor, he looked at me. Dana. Yes, sir. His voice was completely even. What was your call sign? Connor snorted immediately. Dad, come on. Robert didn't acknowledge him, he waited. I thought about deflecting. I'm genuinely not someone who talks about that chapter of my career. I've spent years not talking about it. But Robert waited with the patience of a man who had spent 30 years having conversations where the stakes were actually high. So I answered. Jukebox. The reaction from Robert was immediate, and it was small, and it was everything. His eyes widened, just slightly, just enough. Enough that I noticed, enough that Connor noticed too. Robert sat back in his chair. He looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen directed at me in years, something between disbelief and recognition. Your jukebox, Mercer. I nodded once. Across the table, Connor frowned. What does that mean? Nobody answered. Robert kept his eyes on me for a long moment. Then, slowly, he turned toward his son. The disappointment on his face hit the room like a dropped temperature. Connor, his voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. You should have stopped talking about 5 minutes ago. Connor laughed nervously. Dad, what are you? No idea, Robert shook his head almost to himself. You have no idea. The rest of dinner never recovered. People tried. They switched topics, brought up football scores, asked about travel plans, passed dishes around with a little too much enthusiasm. The effort was visible and it failed. Conversations stumbled. Silences landed. And through all of it, I sat there thinking about one thing. Not Connor, not Robert. Daniel. About 20 minutes later, I excused myself and walked down the hallway. I closed the bathroom door behind me, stood at the sink, looked in the mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't weak. She wasn't inexperienced. She wasn't a decoration. But she was fighting something. Not anger, something more complicated than anger. Something that happens when you've spent years building something real, something earned, something that cost you physically and mentally and personally, and then you watch the people closest to you decide, in a quiet moment, that none of that is worth one sentence of defense. I stood under that yellow bathroom light, and I refused to cry. But I understood something. What hurt most wasn't the joke. Jokes from people like Connor are predictable. What hurt was my husband's plate, his deliberate, chosen, comfortable silence. The drive home was the kind of quiet that has texture, dense, heavy. You can feel it pressing against the windows. Outside, Chesapeake was dark except for porch lights and the first wave of Christmas decorations that always start appearing the weekend after Thanksgiving. Inflatable snowmen, glowing reindeer, neighborhoods doing their best impression of cheer. Inside the car, just tire hum and the click of the turn signal. 20 minutes passed. Finally, Daniel exhaled. Connor's an idiot. I kept looking out the window. Okay. What do you want me to say? I don't know, Daniel, something, anything. He gripped the wheel tighter. I'm saying he's an idiot. Yeah, you're saying it now. Another pause, then the sentence that made everything worse. He was joking, Dana. I turned toward him, seriously. I'm not defending him. That's literally what you just did. I'm saying that's how Connor is. I laughed, one short, sharp, humorless sound. That's your defense, that's how he is, so because he's always like that, we just accept it. Daniel didn't have an answer for that. We stopped at a red light. The dashboard clock read 8:41, a completely ordinary Friday night for most people in the city. For me, it felt like something had shifted, not dramatically, not irreparably, but undeniably. When the light changed, Daniel tried again. I didn't want to make Thanksgiving worse. I looked at him, for who? His jaw tightened. Dana. No, for who? Because it was already worse for me. It had been worse for me for an hour. The only person that silence protected was you. He didn't answer. We both knew why. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay staring at the ceiling fan, watching shadows from passing cars drift across the walls, which is a dangerous activity after midnight because your brain starts doing things you didn't give it permission to do. It starts collecting evidence. Every insecurity you've ever carried suddenly wants a turn at the microphone. Mine certainly got theirs. Around 1 in the morning, I gave up and went downstairs, made coffee I didn't need, sat at the kitchen table in the dark. And I thought about things I hadn't let myself think about in years. Not about deployments, not about missions, about the aftermath, the physical inventory that accumulates without you noticing until one day you're 40 and it's all sitting right there. The knee that never fully healed, the lower back that introduced itself around 36 and apparently decided to stay permanently, the weight that arrived after my second deployment and resisted every effort to negotiate. I wasn't unhealthy, but I wasn't 25 anymore. And if I'm honest, genuinely honest, there were days that bothered me more than I wanted to admit. You spend enough years in aviation and your body becomes part of the job description. It has to be strong, it has to be functional, it has to perform. And then gradually, quietly, time does what it does. And one morning you make a noise getting out of bed that surprises you, and you realize that somewhere along the way, the job and the body had a conversation that didn't include you. I stared at my cold coffee. What Connor had said, the poster girl thing, it wasn't just insulting, it was familiar, because every woman in uniform hears some version of it eventually. You got promoted because of optics. You got the opportunity because someone needed a diversity number. You got noticed because the photo worked. The details vary, the message stays the same. And the truly awful part, the part I hated sitting with at 1 in the morning, is that after enough repetitions, a tiny, stubborn, infuriating part of your brain starts wondering if the people who love you believe it too. I hated that thought, but it was there, and it had Daniel's face on it. 3 days after Thanksgiving, I got a private message from Robert Weston. 3 sentences. I owe you an apology, so does my son, and maybe your husband does too. I read it twice. Then I sat straighter because for the first time since that dinner, someone besides me had seen exactly what happened. Not a version of it, not a comfortable edit, the actual thing. The following Tuesday, I met Robert for breakfast at a diner near Virginia Beach. Old school, the kind where the coffee arrives before you ask and the waitresses call everyone honey. He was already in a booth by the window when I walked in. He stood when he saw me. That told me everything I needed to know about how seriously he was taking this. We sat, coffee appeared. I'm sorry, he said. No preamble, no qualifications, just sorry. I know. He nodded. I should have shut him down sooner, long before Thursday. I looked at him. What does that mean? Robert sighed. The expression that crossed his face was one I recognized from every senior enlisted leader I'd served around, the particular exhaustion of someone who has spent years cleaning up preventable messes. Connor has been doing this for a while, he said. Not just at Thanksgiving, at every family gathering, small comments, little jokes, nothing anyone would confront him about, just enough over time to shape what people think. I kept my face still. What kinds of things? He hesitated. That you got lucky, that you advanced because of how you looked, that you hadn't actually flown in years, that you were the kind of officer who spent more time in front of cameras than in the air. The anger that moved through me was slow and deep, the dangerous kind. Did people believe him? Robert looked at the table. Some did. That landed harder than I expected. Not because strangers had heard it, because family had. People who had smiled at me across holiday tables. People who had hugged me hello and watched Connor talk and decided the easier story was probably true. Robert looked up. I wanted you to hear it from me, because if this gets worse, you'll want to know where it started. If this gets worse. Not if Connor stops, not if it gets better. If it gets worse. Like he already knew exactly at his son was capable of. That afternoon, I met my friend Renee Ortega for coffee. Renee and I had known each other for years, lieutenant commander, sharp, honest in the way that actually helps rather than just hurts. She took one look at my face when I sat down and said, "Who needs to be relocated to another zip code?" I laughed for the first time in days. We sat outside despite the cold because military people have a complicated relationship with indoor seating and sunlight. I told her everything, the dinner, Robert's breakfast, the years of quiet gossip I'd just learned about. When I finished, she pulled out her phone, scrolled, then slid it across the table. Look at this. It was a promotional flyer. A leadership luncheon at Naval Station Norfolk, 3 weeks out. Guest speakers, senior officers, community leaders, and in the middle a headshot. Connor Weston, featured speaker. Topic, leadership in a changing Navy. You're kidding, I said. Keep looking. She took the phone back, navigated to something else, then handed it to me again. And the moment I saw the second image, my stomach dropped. A presentation slide, draft watermark in the corner, real enough. In the center, a photograph blurred slightly, but recognizable to anyone who knew me, standing in uniform at a family barbecue 2 summers earlier. A candid moment. A private moment. Someone had taken it without asking. The caption underneath read, "Perception versus performance, when image outpaces experience." I read it twice. Then again. Then I looked at Renee. Where did this come from? Someone reviewing the deck flagged it, thought it was inappropriate. She watched my face carefully. It was. I set the phone down. A cold, clarifying feeling moved through my chest. Not rage, something sharper than rage, something that had edges and direction. This wasn't family gossip anymore. This wasn't a stupid joke at a dinner table. Connor had taken my photograph, without permission, and built it into a professional presentation designed to illustrate a point about officers who look good but don't perform. He had used me as the example. And suddenly, I understood what Robert had meant. If this gets worse. It already had. I showed Daniel the slide the next morning. He stared at it for a long time without speaking. Then he looked at me, then back at the phone. The color slowly left his face. Oh. That one syllable, all that contained in it. I almost felt sorry for him. Yeah. He actually used your photo. He did. Without asking. Without asking. Daniel sat down heavily at the kitchen table, rubbed his face. What was he thinking? He wasn't, I said, that's the point. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I watched genuine anger move across my husband's face. Not defensive anger, not embarrassed anger, something protective, something that should have arrived 3 weeks earlier at a dinner table in Chesapeake. I noticed it. I also noticed how late it was arriving. Eventually, he looked up. What are you going to do? That was the question. Renee called that afternoon with more news. The slide was flagged by the event coordinator, she said. Connor was asked to remove it. Good. He refused. I stopped moving. He what? He argued, said it was a general example, said people were being oversensitive. About a photograph he didn't have permission to use. Apparently he felt strongly about his point. I paced the length of the kitchen, twice. Movement helps me think, sometimes. What happened after that? The coordinator escalated it to several people. In military language, several people reviewing something means the situation has graduated to a different category, the kind of category that follows you. The kind of several people you don't want reading your emails, Renee added. After I hung up, I sat for a long time. Until this point, I had been telling myself I could handle this quietly. Keep it private. Let Connor be Connor and let the consequences find him eventually. But Connor had been given a direct opportunity to correct a mistake, and he had looked at that opportunity and doubled down. That mattered. Arrogance is one thing, refusing correction is something else entirely. Robert called that evening. I had a conversation with my son. His voice was tired, a different kind of tired than the breakfast. He believes everyone is overreacting. That's predictable. He thinks he's being attacked. I exhaled slowly. Funny how that works. People who throw punches are always shocked when someone notices. Robert was quiet for a moment. Then, Dana, are you planning to report him? I thought about it, longer than he probably expected. I don't know. Good. Good. Anger hasn't made your decision yet. I looked out the window. The sky was deep orange at the edges, fading to gray above the rooftops. Anger hasn't made your decision yet. That was exactly what I needed to hear. Not advice, just a mirror. The easy path would been filing a formal complaint immediately. There were probably 3 different regulations Connor had wandered into, using someone's likeness without consent, misrepresenting personnel records, professional conduct violations. I could have ended his trajectory right then. But I kept stopping. I wanted him exposed. I didn't want him destroyed. There was a difference. Renee met me for lunch a few days later. She arrived carrying a physical folder, which immediately signaled that whatever was inside was either very good or very bad for someone. She opened it on the table. Event schedules, speaker lists, review notes, attendee rosters. I scanned the pages, then I stopped. One name, midway down the attendee list. Captain William Rowlands. I looked up slowly. You're not serious. Completely serious. Captain William Rowlands. The same name Robert had mentioned at breakfast. The same name connected to a night I had spent years carefully not revisiting. A night that cost several people a great deal and that I had filed away in a part of my memory I didn't open often. Connor knew nothing about that night. He never cared enough to find out. Renee watched my face. What are you thinking? I looked at the attendee list again, then up at her. The universe has a strange sense of humor. She smiled, that it does. The morning of the luncheon started gray and wet. Steady coastal drizzle, the kind that doesn't pick a fight, just slowly wins. I woke before my alarm at 5:12. For a few seconds I lay there, ceiling above me, listening to the rain, remembering why my stomach felt tight. Beside me, Daniel was pretending to be asleep. I could tell, you learn these things. You awake? I asked. A pause, yeah. Neither of us moved. Finally, he said, you don't have to go. Yes, I do. Dana's. Daniel, if I don't show up, my absence becomes the story. I'm tired of other people writing the story. He didn't argue, because he knew I was right. Naval Station Norfolk looked the same as it always does. Ships dark against the harbor water. Personnel moving between buildings with coffee cups and purpose. The base has a rhythm, predictable, structured, familiar. After years of this life, it still comforts me in a way I can't fully explain. The event was held in a conference building near the waterfront. Standard military setup, rows of chairs, projector screen, coffee stations in the back, round tables along the sides. The room was filling as we arrived. Retired officers, active duty personnel, civilian contractors, community members, the whole mix. I found Robert near the front. He saw me and gave one small nod. Nothing more, good. Across the room, Connor stood beside the projector, shaking hands, laughing, working the crowd with the ease of someone who believes the crowd is there specifically for him. He looked comfortable, prepared, completely unaware. Renee slipped into the chair beside me. You okay? No. Good, if you were comfortable, I'd be worried. The session began at 11:35. Connor was introduced, took the stage, and for the first 10 minutes, I have to be honest, he did well. He was poised, articulate, engaging. The audience responded. People nodded. Someone in the row ahead of me took notes. I watched him and felt something complicated. Because Connor wasn't stupid. He wasn't incompetent. He was charming and smart and genuinely understood how to hold a room. He was also a man who had decided that the story he wanted to tell mattered more than whether it was true. He moved into a section about perception and leadership, about how image shapes professional standing, about the gap between visibility and substance. My stomach tightened. I knew exactly where this was going. Renee crossed her arms slowly. Robert stared straight ahead. Connor clicked the remote. The slide appeared. My photograph, slightly blurred but there, center of the frame, caption below it, clean and formatted as though it belonged. Perception versus performance, when image outpaces experience. A few people in the room shifted, not dramatically, just enough. Connor smiled, he was comfortable, he was in his moment. We have to be careful, he said, that we don't confuse visibility with value. Beside me, Daniel's jaw tightened. I considered staying quiet, genuinely considered it. I could let the room move past this. I could file it away and deal with it through proper channels after. I could avoid the confrontation and protect everyone from the discomfort. Then I remembered sitting in a bathroom in Chesapeake with yellow light overhead, looking at a woman in a mirror who had survived things this room would never fully understand, and deciding to swallow it all and say nothing. I was done swallowing it. I stood up. Not dramatically, not with noise, I just stood. The room noticed immediately. Connor noticed. His smile fractured slightly. Lieutenant Weston. His recovery was quick, professional smile. Yes, ma'am. I pointed at the SCR. Ian, who gave you permission to use that image? Complete silence. Connor glanced at the slide, then back at me. It's been anonymized. That's not what I asked. The room was very still now. Someone behind me had stopped breathing, I was fairly certain. It's being used as a general example. Of what? A leadership concept. He shifted his weight slightly, the difference between image and substance. Did you verify the record of the officer, in that photograph, before using it to illustrate a deficiency? No answer. Connor laughed, the nervous kind, the one people deploy when they're stalling. I think we're getting too focused on the example here. You chose the example. Then a voice from the front row. Old, calm, the kind of calm that has nothing to prove. That's a fair question. Every head in the room turned. Captain William Rowland stood slowly, using the cane beside his chair for support. Once he was upright, the room's attention didn't waver. Not because of the rank. Because of what rank can't manufacture, the particular quality of someone who has been through something real and came out carrying it quietly. He looked at the slide, then at Connor, then at me. Do you know who that officer is, Lieutenant? Connor swallowed. No, sir. Rollins nodded, looked at me. I do. The room held its breath. Her call sign is Jukebox. Something happened in the air of that room. A shift, collective recognition, not of a name but of a weight. Rollins continued slowly. Years ago, a lot of good people made difficult decisions during a very bad night. He paused. A man I cared about came home because of those decisions, because people did their jobs exactly right when nothing else was going right. He looked directly at Connor. She was one of those people. Connor's face had changed, the color had changed, the confidence had changed. Sir, I didn't know. Exactly, Rollins let the word sit. Exactly. It landed harder than any raised voice could have. Because it was true, Connor didn't know, he had never tried to know. He had built an argument, chosen a target, constructed a narrative, and done zero work to verify whether any of it was real. Connor tried again. I wasn't criticizing her specifically, sir. The slide was meant to represent a broader. Why is her photograph on it? I didn't need to add anything. Rollins had already said everything. Connor looked toward the moderator, toward the audience, toward anyone who might offer an exit. Nobody moved. Then Daniel stood. He didn't look at me first, he looked at Connor. Take the slide down, Connor. His voice wasn't loud, it carried anyway. Connor stared at him. Daniel. Take it down. I looked at my husband, I genuinely hadn't expected this. Not here, not in this room with these people watching, but there he was, standing, choosing. Late, very late. But standing. Connor looked toward his father. Robert Weston rose from his seat slowly. The room became completely still in a different way, the way it gets when everyone understands that whatever comes next will matter. Son. Dad, please. I spent 30 years, Robert said quietly, teaching people to respect what the uniform represents. He looked at the slide, then at Connor. Somewhere along the way, you started confusing respect for the uniform with collecting attention for yourself. The silence afterward was absolute. Because it came from the one person whose opinion Connor had spent his entire career trying to earn, and it arrived not as rage but as sorrow, which is so much worse. The moderator quietly removed the slide. The session ended early. Outside, the rain had stopped. I stood near the parking lot, watching the harbor. Ships moved slowly in the distance. Normal Tuesday, normal military base. Nothing about what had just happened inside that building would show up on the surface of this world. Connor found me alone. No audience, no microphone. He stopped a few feet away, and for a moment he just stood there, and I saw something I hadn't seen in all the years I'd known him. He looked uncertain. You happy now? I looked at him. Really, that's what you came over here to ask? He glanced away. What was the point of all that? I thought about the question, about Thanksgiving, about the slide, about a bathroom mirror and a long drive home and a husband staring at his plate, and a morning that started at 1 a.m. with cold coffee and the ceiling fan spinning. The point, I said, is that you don't get to make me smaller to feel bigger, and the people in that room needed to understand what you'd been doing. He didn't have anything for that. For once in his life, the silence belonged to him. Here's the part of this story people don't expect. Things got worse before they got better. By Saturday, the family had mobilized. Sides were chosen. Most of them, predictably, focused less on the fact that Connor had used my photograph without permission and more on the fact that I had made things uncomfortable. A message arrived from Connor's mother. I read it twice. Dana, I wish you could have handled this with a little more grace. Family should protect family. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I set the phone face down on the counter. Because there comes a point where explaining obvious things stops being worth the energy. The person who causes the harm gets the sympathy. The person who names the harm gets the criticism. That dynamic is older than either of us. That evening, Daniel and I sat on the back patio after dark. The weather had finally cleared. A cargo ship moved across the distant edge of the Elizabeth River, slow and deliberate, and lit up against the black water. We sat quietly for a while. Then Daniel said, "I owe you a real apology." I looked at him. Not the kind I gave before. He turned toward me. At Thanksgiving, when Connor said what he said, I was thinking about keeping the peace. I know. I told myself silence was the safest option. I know that too. But I understand now that I wasn't protecting peace. He paused. I was protecting myself, my comfort, my position in that room. I didn't say anything, I let it sit. I should have backed you up. Yes. I was wrong. Yes. A sad, quiet laugh. You're really going to make me earn this. You've had 3 weeks to prepare. He laughed, real this time, and then I laughed. And for a moment, the thing sitting between us was still there, but it had breathing room. Then he got serious again. I don't expect everything to be fine immediately. Good, because it won't be. I just need you to know that I see it now. I looked at him for a long moment. I believe you, but I need different, not just sorry. The relief on his face shifted into something more sober, more real. Because apologies matter, and changed behavior matters more. In the months that followed, things settled. Not perfectly, they never do. Connor's presentation was reviewed by several people who had been in that room and several others who hadn't. Questions were asked. His promotion package stalled. Nobody publicly dismantled him. Nobody ended his career. But people started paying attention differently. And sometimes, that is exactly enough. Robert and I spoke occasionally after that. Short conversations, usually, Navy stories that somehow always turned into something else. One afternoon, he called and mentioned that Connor was struggling. Quieter, less certain. He's miserable, Robert said. He earned some of it, I replied. He did, a pause, but not forever. I understood immediately what he meant. Accountability isn't the same thing as permanent punishment. There's a version of leadership that knows how to hold someone responsible without holding them under. Good leaders understand that difference. 3 months later, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, almost. Curiosity won. Hey, Connor's voice, different, less polished, less certain. What do you need, Connor? A long pause. I wanted to apologize. I sat down. I've been telling myself for a long time that you were the problem, he said. That you got where you are because of, I don't know, luck, timing, optics. He stopped. I was jealous. I didn't interrupt. You never had to announce yourself, he said slowly. You never chased attention, you never needed people to know how important you were, and they respected you anyway. Another pause. I spent years trying to figure out how to get that, and instead I used you to make myself feel bigger. The room was very quiet. Finally I said, that's the most honest thing you've ever said to me. A short, uncomfortable laugh on his end. Can we start over? I sat with the question, long enough that he was probably nervous. No, I said, but we can start from here. The relief in his silence was immediate. And strangely, genuinely, so was mine. I've been thinking a lot lately about the things nobody warns you about when you choose a life in uniform. They tell you about the physical demands, the deployments, the sacrifice. What they don't tell you is that some of the hardest moments won't happen in the field, or in the air, or in a ship at sea. They'll happen at a dinner table in November. They'll happen in the silence of someone you love choosing comfort over courage. They'll happen in a bathroom mirror at 49 years worth of nothing, fighting something you shouldn't have to fight alone. What this entire chapter taught me wasn't how to win an argument. It was the difference between winning and drawing a boundary. Winning depends on somebody else behaving a certain way. A boundary depends only on you. My right knee still complains when the weather changes. My uniform fits differently than it did 15 years ago. Some mornings, I make a sound getting out of bed that surprises me, And there are days when all of that accumulates in a way that requires a quiet conversation with myself in the mirror. But standing near the North Alk waterfront one morning, a few weeks after everything settled, cold air, early light, the harbor moving beneath me the way it always does, none of that felt like the point. What I thought about instead was this: the people who underestimate you reveal far more about themselves than they ever reveal about you. Jake's joke told me nothing I didn't already know about myself. It told me everything I needed to know about him. And the silence of a man sitting across a dinner table told me exactly what work still needed to be done in my marriage. We did that work. It wasn't quick, it wasn't comfortable, it's ongoing. Real things usually are. If you've ever sat at a table where someone decided your accomplishments were optional, where the people closest to you chose the safer side, where the noise from one careless voice got louder than everything you actually built, I need you to hear this. You are not what they needed you to be. You are not the story they told about you in rooms you weren't invited into. You are what you did when it was hard. You are what you carried when nobody was watching. You are the decisions you made on the nights that still come to you in dreams. Respect isn't demanded, it isn't performed. It's carried, quietly, daily, even when nobody else in the room has figured out yet what they're standing next to. Keep carrying it. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one.